Hello everyone, this is Anand Pal Singh and today we are going to talk about DevOps fundamentals. We'll try to understand about DevOps and the myth floating around in the market. So there is a different understanding by different individuals and they have their own perception. So we just jot down all the points today and try to understand DevOps and we'll see like how we can use this DevOps in our projects and why it's a buzzword. So that's more about this slide. Let's move on to the next slide. So today's agenda is we'll try to understand what is DevOps. Then we will move on to the next slide, which is like why this DevOps is needed. And we'll understand why DevOps is used. And then we'll move on to understand DevOps lifecycle. And then we'll try to understand, like after understanding all these 4 points, why it's being used, where it is needed, understand the life cycle, we'll see who actually is a DevOps engineer. That's about this slide. Let's move on to our next slide and try to understand what is DevOps. So DevOps is a culture which promotes collaboration between different teams. So it's basically what is DevOps? DevOps is a way to expedite your application releases. How you can expedite your releases? It's basically try to shorten the delivery time. And the way to shorten the delivery time is you can do or invoke lots of automations. So when you implement DevOps culture in your organization, it helps to increase the number of releases for your project in the short span of time. And it's basically when you implement DevOps, it's you would be best utilizing your team and the resources around. You would not be waiting for other teams, and you know sometimes it happens where uh, you are waiting for other teams to build the server and then there is a idle time, you're doing nothing, and then there is some document process that server team follows, and then it will go to other middleware team, they build the servers, and then comes to the development team. So it's better when we follow this DevOps culture, all these teams will work together and collaborate together and work on the same feature. Thank you. So in this slide, we'll see and we'll try to understand why DevOps is needed. So before DevOps, all the development teams, infrastructure team, testing teams, all the teams working in isolation. So a development team doing their development work, server infrastructure team is doing their work, and they're supporting multiple other teams. And so they're not in sync. Even the testing team is not in sync. So it's basically like you're working on one feature. So all the teams are not aligned to the common goal. So without DevOps, basically everyone is working on their separate goals, their separate deliverables, not on the common goal. So basically, the most of the time, the team were focusing on testing. Though the development is completed, the development team is idle. The more time was focused on testing, deploying, and troubleshooting the issues instead of building the whole project. So what does it mean is if we have some automation in place where like the DevOps team is there and a development person is working, DevOps person is working, infrastructure team member is working, a testing team, making a small team working on the same feature, delivering the same feature with DevOps tools, it's very easy to expedite all these releases. So the unit testing can be done, the release testing can be done, the testing can be done with the DevOps tool in the short span of time. So, and everyone are collaborated, they know what's going on this feature, what is the current state, and they all work on the common goal.
And as discussed, like earlier, it was like every team has their own timelines working on their uh, timeline of delivery. So developers work, they have their own timelines for delivering one particular or developing one particular feature code. Server team has their own timelines where they're building their own server infrastructure to support this feature. So the teams are not integrated, they are not aligned. So with DevOps culture, it helps you to align the team, collaborate the team, and expedite your delivery.
So why DevOps is used? So DevOps is a process where your agile teams can use continuous integration and continuous delivery. So why we need these continuous integration and delivery? It's basically it helps you to expedite your releases. In a way, we can say that why these releases is basically for your product development. So when you expedite your releases, automate your releases, it shorten your release time, and this way your product can go faster into the market. So you can inline in the market, and you can be up with your competitors in the market. So what is continuous integration? So it's basically a DevOps practice where developers uh, keep pushing their changes to the code repository. So the code repository is nothing, your version control system. So we have two types of version control system. One is centralized and one is distributed. So example of centralized is your SVN and distributed is your Git. So what is the difference? It's basically like when we talk about centralized, it's all your repositories will be on a central server and you communicate with that remote server and do all operations on the remote server. What is distributed? A distributed version control system is you have the local copy of your remote repository and you do all your operations into your local. You can check versions, you can check logs, you can do commits and everything in your local. So that's all the difference. For further information, you can check my another YouTube video where I explained about these version control systems. So it's on Git. So continuous integration is basically when you push your changes to this code repository, a build triggers automatically, and what that build do, it's basically it compiles your code, run your unit test, and once that build is completed, it develops or it builds a artifact and places into a artifactory. Now understand, like developer working on a code, and then once the code is completed, it has pushed it to a code repository. Now from the code repository, the build has automatically got triggered, which has done your compilation, your unit testing, and then once that is compiled and this unit testing is done, the artifact has been built. And that in the third stage, it's pushing that artifact to a remote repository, your artifactory or your Nexus. So instead of depending on different teams where like the testing was being conducted by a separate team, now it's everything is automated and integrated. So these three stages are continuously integrated. So you keep on doing the check-ins to the code repository, and the build is keep on happening, unit test is keep on happening, and you have a new releases of the code getting into your artifactory or into Nexus, and which is ready for further testing and deployment. Now we will understand what is continuous delivery. So it's again like it's a DevOps practice. So in the previous section where we have understood like what is continuous integration. So once the code has reached to the artifactory, so what is continuous delivery? It's as the name indicates, the delivery should happen continuously. So the moment the code moves to the next stages of where the code is present in Artifactory, so there will be a trigger. So where the code will be taken or the artifact will be taken from the Artifactory and will be deployed onto the server, and then further testing stages can continue. So let's take an example. So you're working on a Java code, you're working on a one feature. So you have completed your feature and you're working on a feature branch. You pushed your changes to the feature branch, and then the build get automatically triggered. How it is triggered? So you have a Jenkins job, so which will be polling onto your code, code repository. So the moment check-in happens, it triggers that job. What that job is doing, it's basically it's building your code artifacts. So as part of this build, so build can be done using Maven or it can be done using Gradle. So as part of this build, you do compilation, unit testing, and then a artifact is generated which will be placed into your artifactory. Now, once the artifactory, the code is in artifactory, another job can be triggered which will take the code from the artifactory and deploy it onto a web container. It could be Tomcat, it could be Gearbox, it could be WebLogic, it could be WebSphere. So what's happening now? So with continuous integration, the continuous delivery is also happening where you have different phases. Once the deployment has happened, then you can use different tools for testing where you can do the code quality, where you can do the integration test. And even if there is a manual intervention needed by the testing teams, they can work on these different environments, testing environments. So this is continuous delivery. You must have heard about a word called continuous deployment. And people mostly get confused by continuous delivery and continuous deployment. In most organization, we don't follow continuous deployment. It's continuous delivery which is being followed. So what is the difference? So as we talked about a continuous delivery, so continuous delivery is basically where the manual intervention is needed before it's going live or going to the production. So you need basic all the stakeholders approvals, user acceptance, and then when all manual checks are done, uh, you're doing okay for that particular release, and then that particular release will be deployed onto production. But in continuous deployment, there is no explicit approval is needed. So it's the whole integrated pipeline. So the moment you check in the code, and then it will do the deployment, and it follow all the life cycles of your testing stages and directly will go to production. And now we'll try to understand the DevOps life cycle. So this is a very good pictorial representation of your DevOps life cycle. I got this picture somewhere from web, and it's a common picture being used in in many presentation I seen in many videos. So I want to thank whomsoever has worked on this particular picture. It's very easy to understand the DevOps lifecycle, and it's my whole credit to the person who has developed this picture. I just copy pasted it from web. So it's basically a pictorial representation of your DevOps lifecycle. And in the next slide, we'll try to understand all these different life cycle of DevOps. So let's try to understand different stages of your DevOps life cycle. So the very first stage is development. So if you're working in agile, or your team is following agile methodology, you must know it's basically you have one feature. So for that one particular feature, you define a story. So you define a goal for that particular feature. And that particular story will be broken down into multiple short stories. So these short stories basically will be a task for your DevOps team now. So what we are doing is we are for one big piece of development work, we are creating smaller chunks of development work pieces. So all these smaller pieces of development can go in parallel. So you can, have if you have 3 or 4 developers working in team, these small pieces of deliverables can be assigned to them. So that the continuous working of that particular feature can go on. So this way you can expedite your development work. So testing, it's basically like your quality assurance team can use tools like Selenium, and it is integrated with your development life cycle. So you can use we talked about it. DevOps has it like so many tools to to understand or to implement DevOps, right? So we talked about Git, we talked about Jenkins. So Selenium is one of the tool for your quality assurance testing. So integration at this stage. So once like your feature is completed, so you have a particular product which is already live. And now that particular product, for that particular product, you are developing a new feature. So in Git or in any code repository, you follow different branching strategies. So in every organization, they have their own branching strategies. So let's consider one where you have a master branch which being deployed where you have the product code which is currently running in your live environment or production environment. So for the new feature, you have created one feature branch. You have completed your development and pushed your changes to your feature branch. So once like all the testing and everything is done, you can integrate that particular branch to the master branch. So you can merge your changes to the master branch. So once that is done and you are sure like no bugs are there, all the testing has been done, we can move on to the next stage, that is your deployment. So you keep on working on this integration. So either you have like one feature branch and multiple short small branches, you can take it out and then you can merge all those branches into the feature branch, and then continuous deployment and of continuous delivery of that branch can happen, so that like it follow all the stages of your testing life cycle, and it it will get deployed into your staging environment, testing environment, and further environments. And once like it is ready for the deployment with all the approvals of stakeholders, you can release that particular feature. And then the next stage is monitoring. In this phase, the operation team will take care of if there is any inappropriate behavior. It's basically the operations teams, your run team. So where they monitor the current behavior of after deploying this particular feature. So now to the final slide. After understanding all the DevOps basics, different life cycle, understanding continuous integration, continuous delivery. Now we'll try to understand who is a DevOps engineer. So DevOps engineer is an IT professional who understand the DevOps methodology, who have good understanding or knowledge or experience of DevOps tools. So continuous integration tools, continuous delivery tools like Jenkins, uh, code control or code version tool like Git, SVN, understanding on some middleware components like Tomcat, JBoss, good understanding on scripting, should have good interpersonal skills, should have good soft skills, good listening skills. Why all these skills are needed? Because as a DevOps engineer, you are required to be in collaboration with testing team, a development team, infrastructure team. So as a DevOps engineer, it's your responsibility is to expedite the release, and or if there are any impediments, try to resolve them and try to expedite the product release. How you can do that? You can, if there are some any issues where the manual efforts are needed, you can do some automations. So sometimes it's as a DevOps engineer, you have to write the code as well. And as a DevOps engineer, it may be needed like you need to build the whole infrastructure where you can use tools like Ansible, you can use tools like Chef. If you're working on your data center, on-prem data center, so where you are responsible for building the infrastructure, then you can use Chef, where you can write your own recipes and script them so that you know this building on of infrastructure can be automated. So now you are not dependent on a server infrastructure team to build the whole infrastructure. So you can automate that process as well. So this code is known as infrastructure as a code. If you are working on cloud, there are different tools. Like if you're working on AWS, you can use CloudFormation templates to build the whole stack. And we'll understand more about AWS or cloud infrastructure in my next presentations. So this is more about DevOps engineer. So it's basically he's a technical professional who has good understanding on DevOps tools, who understand all the DevOps lifecycle, uh, have good understanding on DevOps tools, and it will help you to expedite your releases. Thank you everyone for your patience for watching this video or this presentation. Hopefully you have got some insight on DevOps fundamentals and basics where we have explained about continuous integration, continuous delivery, different DevOps lifecycle. I feel it must have induced some eagerness on you or eagerness to learn more on DevOps. And I will be looking forward for your comments. If you have any questions related to DevOps on on this presentation, you can comment it. I'll get back to you on this. Thank you again. Thank you for your help and for watching this video and for your patience.